Looking at the Ontario housing market, we need to talk about what's really happening in cities across the province. The warning signs are everywhere, and some cities are sitting on a powder keg that's about to explode. But don't miss what's coming at number 5 and especially number 2, because what we've uncovered there will shock you to your core. Number 10. Thunder Bay. Thunder Bay might seem like an unlikely candidate for a housing crash, but here's what most people don't know. This city has been artificially propped up by government spending and resource extraction that's quietly drying up. The average home price jumped 40% in just 2 years. But here's the kicker. The population is actually shrinking. The real problem? Thunder Bay's economy depends heavily on forestry and mining, industries that are facing massive cutbacks due to environmental regulations and global market shifts. When these jobs disappear, and they're already starting to, who's going to buy these overpriced homes? The city's aging infrastructure is crumbling, with water main breaks becoming a weekly occurrence. Young people are leaving in droves, heading to Toronto or Vancouver for opportunities that simply don't exist here anymore. What makes this particularly devastating is that many retirees moved here thinking they'd found an affordable paradise. They're about to discover that when the economic foundation crumbles, their home equity goes with it. The writing is on the wall, but most residents are choosing to ignore it. But Thunder Bay's problems pale in comparison to what's brewing in our next city. Number 9. Sudbury. Sudbury's housing market is living on borrowed time, and here's why this should terrify anyone who owns property there. This city built its entire identity around mining, specifically nickel, but global supply chains are shifting faster than anyone anticipated. The real estate boom here happened because people assumed mining would always provide stable employment. Here's the shocking reality. Sudbury's largest employer, Vail, has been quietly reducing its workforce for 3 consecutive years. They're not advertising this because they don't want to cause panic, but the numbers don't lie. When a one-industry town loses its primary industry, the housing market doesn't just decline, it collapses. The ripple effects are already starting. Local businesses are reporting decreased foot traffic, and for sale signs are staying up longer than they used to. Property taxes are climbing because the city needs to maintain services with a shrinking tax base. It's a death spiral that most residents haven't recognized yet. What's particularly heartbreaking is watching families who thought they'd secured their future suddenly realize they're trapped in homes they can't sell for what they paid. The emotional toll is devastating, and it's spreading through the community like wildfire. Speaking of devastating impacts, wait until you hear about number 8. Number 8. Sault Ste. Marie. Sault Ste. Marie represents everything wrong with Ontario's housing market in one terrifying package. This border city experienced a housing surge that made no economic sense, driven entirely by speculation and government pandemic spending that's now ending. Here's what nobody talks about. Sault Ste. Marie's population peaked decades ago. The steel industry that once supported thousands of families now employs a fraction of that number. Yet somehow, home prices doubled during the pandemic. This wasn't organic growth. It was a bubble inflated by cheap money and people fleeing expensive southern Ontario markets. The crash here will be particularly brutal because there's no economic foundation to support current prices. The city's main hospital is struggling financially, government jobs are being cut, and the casino, yes, a casino is considered a major employer, isn't generating the revenue it once did. What makes this situation truly tragic is that many buyers stretched themselves financially to afford homes here, believing they were making a smart investment. They borrowed against future earnings that may never materialize. When reality hits, and it's coming soon, these families will face financial ruin that could last generations. But even Sault Ste. Marie's problems seem manageable compared to the disaster unfolding in number 7. Number 7. North Bay. North Bay's housing market is a textbook example of what happens when emotion overrides economics. This city marketed itself as an affordable alternative to Southern Ontario, attracting buyers who didn't do their homework about long-term viability. The reality check is brutal. North Bay's economy depends on government services and seasonal tourism, hardly the foundation for a sustainable housing boom. The city has been losing population for over a decade, yet home prices increased by 60% in 3 years. This mathematical impossibility can only end one way. Here's what should keep North Bay homeowners awake at night. The provincial government is consolidating services and eliminating redundant positions. Many of the government jobs that people relied on are disappearing through attrition and budget cuts. Without these stable incomes, who's going to maintain these inflated property values? The infrastructure challenges are mounting too. North Bay's roads, sewers, and utilities need massive investment, but the tax base can't support it. Property owners are about to get hit with special assessments and dramatically higher taxes just as their home values plummet. It's a perfect storm of financial devastation. The psychological impact is already visible in local Facebook groups and community meetings. Panic is setting in as people realize they may have made the worst financial decision of their lives. And if North Bay seems bad, number 6 will make your blood run cold. Number 6. Timmins represents the absolute worst-case scenario for a housing market built on false hope. This mining town experienced a speculative frenzy that ignored every economic fundamental, and the reckoning is about to be catastrophic. Gold mining drove Timmins for over a century, but here's what real estate agents didn't tell buyers. Modern mining requires far fewer workers, and many operations are becoming automated or shutting down entirely. The jobs that supported previous generations simply don't exist anymore, yet housing prices tripled in some neighborhoods. The demographic reality is terrifying. Timmins has one of the oldest populations in Ontario, with young people leaving as soon as they graduate high school. Who exactly is supposed to buy these overpriced homes when current owners want to sell? The math doesn't work, and mathematics always wins in the end. What's particularly cruel is that many seniors invested their life savings in upgrading their homes, thinking they were preserving wealth for their children. Instead, they've created a liability that their families won't be able to unload. The emotional devastation of watching a lifetime of work evaporate is destroying family relationships and community bonds. Local businesses are already feeling the pinch as people tighten their budgets, sensing what's coming. The domino effect has started, and once it gains momentum, nothing can stop it. But Timmins's nightmare scenario looks like a gentle correction compared to what we discovered about number 5. Number 5. Kingston. Now here's where things get really interesting, and this is why I told you not to miss number 5. Kingston's housing market crash won't just devastate local residents, it's going to send shockwaves through Ontario's entire economy. And here's why nobody saw it coming. Kingston positioned itself as the perfect blend of historic charm, university town stability, and proximity to major urban centers. Real estate investors bought this story completely, driving prices up 80% in 4 years. But they missed a crucial detail that's about to destroy everything. Queen's University, Kingston's economic anchor, is facing an enrollment crisis that administrators are desperately trying to hide. International student numbers are plummeting due to federal immigration changes, and domestic enrollment is dropping as students choose more affordable options or skip university entirely. When your primary economic driver starts contracting, the housing market follows immediately. Here's the bombshell that real estate agents aren't telling buyers. Queens is quietly eliminating programs and reducing staff through early retirement packages and restructuring initiatives. The university that employs thousands directly and supports thousands more indirectly is shrinking, but they're managing the narrative to prevent panic. The rental market collapse will happen first and fastest. With fewer students needing housing, rental property investors will face massive vacancies. These investors borrowed heavily against projected rental income that's evaporating. When they're forced to sell, the flood of properties will crater the entire market. What makes Kingston's situation uniquely dangerous is that it attracted buyers from Toronto who used their inflated home equity to purchase investment properties or retirement homes. When Kingston crashes, it will trigger defaults that ripple back to the GTA, amplifying problems in Canada's largest housing market. The psychological impact is already beginning. Local real estate agents are reporting that sellers are becoming increasingly desperate, cutting prices aggressively just to attract buyers. The smart money is quietly exiting, leaving regular families holding properties they can't afford and can't sell. But if Kingston's university-dependent economy seems unstable, wait until you hear about the absolute disaster brewing in Number 4. Number 4. Sarnia's housing market is sitting on a chemical time bomb that most buyers never considered. This border city built its entire economy around petrochemical manufacturing, but global environmental policies and changing energy markets are systematically destroying that foundation. Here's what should terrify anyone who owns property in Sarnia. Major chemical companies are quietly relocating operations to countries with lower environmental standards and cheaper labor. They're not announcing these moves publicly because they want to avoid community backlash, but the evidence is everywhere if you know where to look. Imperial Oil, Nova Chemicals, and other major employers have been reducing their Sarnia workforce through efficiency improvements and modernization projects. What they're really doing is preparing for eventual closure or massive downsizing. When these plants shut down, Sarnia doesn't just lose jobs, it loses its entire reason for existence. The environmental liability issue makes this even worse. Decades of chemical production have left contamination that will require massive cleanup costs. Property owners may find themselves responsible for environmental remediation that costs more than their homes are worth. Insurance companies are already quietly adjusting policies to limit their exposure. What's particularly devastating is that Sarnia attracted buyers who thought they were getting affordable housing near the U.S. border. They didn't realize they were buying into a dying industrial town with massive environmental liabilities. When the truth becomes undeniable, property values won't just decline, they'll become worthless. The border location that seemed like an advantage is actually accelerating the collapse. American companies can easily relocate operations to U.S. cities without dealing with Canadian regulations. Sarnia offers no compelling reason for businesses to stay. And if Sarnia's industrial decline seems catastrophic, Number 3 will show you what happens when an entire region loses its economic purpose. Number 3. Windsor. Windsor's housing market represents one of the most dangerous situations in Ontario because it combines multiple crisis factors that are converging simultaneously. This automotive city is about to experience a perfect storm that will make previous economic downturns look like minor corrections. The automotive industry that built Windsor is fundamentally changing in ways that eliminate the city's competitive advantages. Electric vehicle production requires different skills, different suppliers, and different manufacturing processes. Most importantly, it requires far fewer workers. The jobs that supported Windsor's middle class for generations are disappearing permanently. Here's the terrifying reality that local politicians won't acknowledge. Ford, Stellantis, and other manufacturers are using automation to replace human workers at an accelerating pace. Each new model year requires fewer employees. The companies aren't eliminating jobs through layoffs that grab headlines. They're simply not replacing workers who retire or leave voluntarily. The cross-border economic relationship that once benefited Windsor is now working against it. American companies can achieve the same production goals in U.S. cities without dealing with currency exchange, different regulations, or border delays. Windsor's proximity to Detroit, once its greatest asset, is now meaningless. What makes this particularly heartbreaking is watching families who built multi-generational wealth through automotive employment suddenly realize that wealth is evaporating. Homes that represented security and prosperity are becoming financial anchors that prevent families from relocating to cities with better opportunities. The rental market is already collapsing as young people leave for Toronto, Ottawa, or other cities with viable career paths. Property investors who bought Windsor real estate, thinking they'd found a hidden gem, are discovering they've purchased properties in a declining market with no recovery prospects. The psychological impact extends beyond individual families to the entire community identity. Windsor doesn't know what it wants to be if it's not an automotive city, and that existential crisis is paralyzing decision-making at every level. But Windsor's automotive decline, devastating as it is, cannot compare to the absolute catastrophe that's about to unfold in number 2. Number 2. Hamilton. This is the big one I warned you about, and what we've discovered about Hamilton will shock anyone who thought they understood Ontario's housing market. Hamilton's crash won't just devastate the city, it's going to trigger a domino effect that brings down markets across southern Ontario. Hamilton marketed itself as Toronto's affordable alternative, attracting hundreds of thousands of buyers who stretched their finances to the breaking point. These buyers borrowed against future Toronto-level incomes that don't exist in Hamilton, creating a debt bubble that's about to explode with devastating force. Here's the secret that Hamilton's real estate industry desperately wants to hide. The city's economic growth story is completely fabricated. Yes, people moved there for affordable housing, but they kept their Toronto jobs, commuting daily or working remotely. The pandemic made remote work seem permanent, but employers are now demanding return-to-office policies that Hamilton residents simply cannot accommodate. The commute from Hamilton to Toronto is becoming impossible due to infrastructure limitations and transportation costs. GO Transit is overcrowded, unreliable, and expensive. Highway 403 and the QEW are parking lots during rush hour. People who thought they could maintain Toronto careers while living in Hamilton are discovering they have to choose one or the other. What makes this situation uniquely catastrophic is the leverage involved. Hamilton buyers didn't just stretch to afford their homes, they borrowed against inflated Toronto property values to make purchases. When Hamilton crashes, it will trigger defaults that force Toronto property sales, amplifying the collapse across multiple markets simultaneously. The steel industry that once supported Hamilton is dying a slow death. Stelco and other manufacturers are reducing operations, eliminating jobs, and preparing for eventual closure. The high-paying industrial jobs that could theoretically replace Toronto incomes simply don't exist in sufficient numbers. Here's the part that should terrify anyone with Hamilton exposure. The city attracted speculative investors who bought multiple properties expecting continued appreciation. These investors are about to face massive losses that will force panic selling. When hundreds of investment properties hit the market simultaneously, prices will crater overnight. The social implications are staggering. Hamilton attracted young families who thought they were achieving the Canadian dream of homeownership. Instead, they've trapped themselves in financial obligations they cannot meet in a city with limited economic opportunities. The psychological and social devastation will last for decades. But even Hamilton's multi-market collapse threat seems manageable compared to the absolute disaster that's emerging in our number 1 spot. Number 1. Barrie represents the most dangerous housing market collapse in Ontario's history, and what's about to happen here will redefine how we think about real estate risk. This city didn't just experience a housing boom, it became ground zero for the most reckless speculation and dangerous borrowing practices in Canadian history. Barrie's population growth story is built on a foundation of lies that's about to crumble spectacularly. Yes, people moved there during the pandemic, but they were fleeing Toronto's lockdowns, not pursuing long-term economic opportunities. As urban life normalizes, these residents are discovering they have no reason to stay in Barrie and no ability to maintain their lifestyle there. Here's the apocalyptic reality. Barrie has no sustainable economic base to support current population levels, let alone current housing prices. The city became a bedroom community for Toronto workers, but the economics of that relationship are completely unsustainable. The commute costs, time investment, and quality of life sacrifices are driving people back to urban centers or out of Ontario entirely. The speculation that drove Barrie's prices to insane levels involved borrowing practices that should have been illegal. Investors used inflated Toronto property values as collateral to purchase multiple Barrie properties, creating a leverage chain that's about to snap with devastating force. When Toronto's market corrects, these investors will face margin calls that force immediate liquidation of their Barrie holdings. What makes Barrie's situation uniquely terrifying is the speed at which it will collapse. Unlike cities with diversified economies that decline gradually, Barrie's crash will happen in weeks, not months. The city attracted the most speculative money, the most leveraged buyers, and the most unrealistic expectations. When reality hits, there will be no soft landing. The infrastructure cannot support the population growth that drove the housing boom. Schools are overcrowded, hospitals are overwhelmed, and transportation systems are at capacity. The quality of life decline is accelerating as services fail to meet demand, giving residents additional reasons to leave. Here's the part that should keep everyone awake at night. Barrie's collapse will trigger a provincial crisis that forces government intervention. The number of defaults, bankruptcies, and family displacements will overwhelm social services and create political pressure for bailouts that taxpayers cannot afford. The psychological trauma is already beginning as residents realize they've made catastrophic financial decisions based on false promises and manipulated information. The community bonds that make small cities livable are fracturing under financial stress and mutual resentment. To recap what we've covered today, these 10 cities represent different aspects of Ontario's housing market collapse, but they all share common themes: unsustainable price growth, weak economic foundations, and dangerous borrowing practices. From Thunder Bay's resource dependency to Barrie's speculative frenzy, each market faces unique challenges that will devastate homeowners and communities. What do you think about these cities and their housing market prospects? Have you seen warning signs in your own community that suggest similar problems? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below and tell us which city's situation surprised you the most. If you found this analysis helpful for understanding Ontario's housing market risks, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more real estate insights. Click the bell icon to get notified when we release our next video examining potential solutions and opportunities emerging from these market corrections.